Hi, my name is Teresa, and welcome to my A Girl's Travel Diaries. So today I'm just going to delve into some tips for applying for visas because I know that this is a real need and a real area where a lot of people struggle, particularly when they're traveling. And for today, I'm just going to stay on the more general tips. I'll not delve into specific issues or specific countries. I'll give my more general experience. And then later on, depending on the need and the questions that I get, then I will delve more into more particular countries and share more of my experience having traveled to 50 countries so far. So welcome, leave your comments, and I'll get back to them later. So the first thing that I would say in terms of tips for traveling is that I just want to debunk or demystify this myth that you need an agent in order to be able to apply for a visa. So I think most visas, and I'm just going to stick to the more general touristy or short stay visas because that's what I want to talk about. I'm not talking about someone who's migrating to another country. I'm just going to be more focused on the touristic kind of visas. And so the first thing that I want to demystify is that you don't need an agent to apply for a visa. Most visas to most of the countries, to the US, to the UK, to the Schengen space are really quite straightforward, quite easy to apply, not unless if you have other challenges or difficulties. But generally, you should be able to apply for your own visa. You don't need much of assistance, but you can ask questions. You can do your research and ask questions so that you avoid the pitfalls that many people get into when they're applying for visas. So the first thing is you don't need an agent. It's pretty straightforward. And I've also had cases where friends tell me that the agent actually messed them up. And how this happens is because the agent, for example, in that question where it says, do you have a job? Then the agent says, ticks no. But this is someone who actually had a career, is a professional, has a very good job, and this really messed up that visa, and the visa was rejected. After being rejected, it was clear that you do not have, ties to your country, you do not have a job or something like that. So it's not always like the agent knows everything. Sometimes you're the person that knows yourself best. So I would advise that you try to apply for the visa by yourself. And in case you're stuck, you can always ask the right questions and you'll always get the right answers. So that's my first tip. The second thing that I would like to talk about is that you have to really be clear on the type of visa you're applying for. So applying for the wrong visa is not recommended. You better be sure about the type of visa that you're applying for. If it's a tourism visa, for example, for the US, it would be B1 or B2. If it's the Schengen visa, it would be a short stay Schengen visa. So you really must be very clear about the type of visa that you're applying for and apply for the right one. Otherwise, you mess yourself completely. The other thing that I would say around the type of visa and something else to look at is the purpose of travel. So why are you going there? I'm dwelling on the more short stay, I'm just visiting a friend or I'm just going to tour the place. So ask yourself, why am I traveling to this particular country? And be very clear on the purpose of your visit. So this really messes people up because some people are not sure, the right business and it's tourism, then they keep mixing themselves up. So you really need to be sure about the type of travel, what you're going to do, and the purpose of travel. Something else that I would also say, in addition to this, is think about that's also tied to the type of travel is your itinerary. So what are you going to do when you go to that country? What is your itinerary? How long are you going to be there? Is it reasonable? For example, if you say, I'm going to tour a country, and then you've indicated there that you're going to be there for 6 months. So there are a lot of question marks that start coming. It has to really tie in and neatly tie up. So you really have to think about, what am I going to do? What's my itinerary like? Where am I arriving from? And this is particularly very important for the Schengen space, because the Schengen space, even the country that you apply to, is the first country that you're going to land in, or the country that you're going to spend the most time in. So you really have to be sure about your itinerary. Where am I going to start from? Where am I going to end? And that means that you have to do your research well in advance. So you have to do your research and be sure that you know which country to start with. Because, for example, the Schengen space, what could happen is that maybe you want to go to, let's say you want to go to Italy, but then later on you realize it's cheaper to get a ticket to, I don't know, maybe to Greece. So then you'd really have to be clear about where you're starting from, because and this has happened to me. I went to this embassy because I could not get an appointment in the other one, and I needed to travel very fast. But when I went to this particular embassy, they said, well, you're going to spend more days in this other country, so go get your visa application from the other country. I was like, well, come on, I can't get an appointment in there in time. And they're like, you don't care. So yeah, you have to really be sure about the duration and exactly where you're going to go and what you're going to do. Then something else that you, for short stay visas, because most people go on the invite of someone. So maybe you've been invited by a family, a friend, relative, and you've been invited to go and maybe see the place, to visit them. You really have to be clear about who is your host. Yeah, maybe it's an organization. Like a lot of people travel because maybe a church organization has invited you. Maybe you're going as a speaker to talk, and this happens to me quite a lot, that I go as a speaker to talk somewhere. So you have to really be clear on your host and be clear on what they're going to cover and what they cannot cover, because this is very important, because you have to be clear on, are they covering the tickets? Are they going to cover the cost of the visa? Are they going to cover the cost of the food? Maybe you're going for a conference and you'll only have meals during the conference, but what about the time that is out of the conference? So you have to be very clear on who your host is, what are their limits, and then you also have to show, for most countries, you must show that you have some relationship with your host. Like, for example, why am I being invited to go speak about this topic? It's because I have expertise in that topic. And so it's clear that for this conference, which is very much related to what my expertise is, I'm being invited to go and talk. So be very clear about who your host is and, the relationship. And then if it's a friend, for example, some countries are very strict on what's the nature of this friendship? How do you know each other? Why does this person want to pay for you a trip out of the blues? Yeah, how do you demonstrate that you've had a friendship? And if you say you've been friends for 10 years, and let's say you don't even have a photo to show that you've been friends for 10 years. So these kind of things put a lot of question marks. And then they start asking, are you just going there as a bridge to go and stay in the country for long term? So keep it tuned. We're still going to delve into a lot of these topics. Let me have my water break. Then another tip that I'm going to give, and I think that this is so important, is tell the truth. Tell the truth and be consistent. So the problem that a lot of people fall into, the trap that a lot of people fall into, is that they listen to a lot of street gossip. And then in the end, they apply for their visa, and they give information that is not true, that is not factual, that is outright ridiculous. So you really have to have your information right. Your information has to be right. You have to look at the years. They have to match up. So if you say, I finished school in this year, did you actually finish school in this year? Don't guess, just go verify your documents even as you do your visa application. So make sure that you have all your documents and you verify the information that you're putting in there. Sometimes I know, you do it very fast. Like myself, I do it very fast. And sometimes I may not, like, when did I leave this place? Or I don't have the information, I may put it, but I leave it on standby. Then later on, when I get that information, I go back and change it. So be very sure about the information that you're giving. And then a lot of people get denied visas, and when they go back, the story changes. When you get denied a visa, let not the story change. For example, in my case, when I first wanted to travel to the US, I needed a visa and I was in a foreign country. So I went to the embassy, I had all my documents, I had all the letters of invite, I had everything. But the only thing the immigration official was questioning is, do you have sufficient ties to this country where you're applying from? And at that point, of course, it was very clear, and they were very clear of the reason for denying the visa, that I did not have sufficient ties with the country that I was applying from, because I had not lived there for so long. I just lived there for a couple of weeks. So then they advised me that it might be better to consider applying from your country of origin. So this is something that I would say it's always good for the countries where it's difficult to get visas. It's always good to apply from home. Why I say this is because from home you have all this. You're able to give all these supporting documents. You're able to prove, the ties to your country. You may not be able to prove the ties to a foreign country because you don't have any allegiance there. You don't have any property there. You don't have any family there. You don't have anything tying you to the country that you're applying from if you're applying from a foreign country. But of course, sometimes you've relocated and you just have to apply from that country. So that's something else that I would really say, be consistent. If you're denied a visa, the next time you go and they ask you, there's always that question, have you ever been denied a visa? The answer is yes. You have to say yes, and you have to give the reason because the reason was given. And remember that these countries have databases, so you cannot think that you're going to cheat the database by changing the story every now and then. In fact, the more inconsistent your story gets, the more the likelihood of being denied a visa. So I'm just going to also add another point that I think is also important. And this is in terms of how you complete the documents. So most visa applications are quite daunting because there's a lot of information needed and a lot of people really struggle. So don't leave blanks. That's the first thing. Incomplete documents will work against you. So ensure that you have every item filled out. If you don't have the information immediately, as I said, you have to go back and research and get that information and put it, and make sure it adds up, it's factual before you click submit or before you give the paper forms. And then documents are so important. When you go to the embassy, like for the countries where they want to interview you, you have to go in and, really be clear on what did they ask for. Most countries nowadays have a checklist. So make sure that you've filled out that checklist, you've ticked everything, and you have everything ready to be able to support yourself. Otherwise, some people go in, their documents are messed up. I know, like some years back, Southern Africa was so difficult, and maybe it still is, to get a visa. You'd go there, and if your documents were not organized right, they'd just tell you, get out, and then you'd come back again later, and maybe sometimes that later would mean that they've already closed the appointments for the day. So you'd really have to go there already, checklist on top, everything the way it's asked for, get the right photos, get professional photos. Don't get some random photos and you're sent back and then you get so frustrated because sometimes you cannot get back in and get another appointment. And then the other thing is, apart from the documentation and the supporting documents, you must have supporting documents. So whatever you say, if you don't have supporting documents, then maybe you're better off not saying it. For example, you say, I run a business. So if you say that I run a business, then where is the proof of your company? Where is the proof of the business account? So sometimes, like I myself, when I've applied for a visa, let's say I overran one account, then I would not even put that account as a supporting document. I would just take the accounts that I'm sure have a good history for that period that they want, and I would give those ones. I would not give an account that I know is messed up, because you're just giving yourself room for more scrutiny. So I would say ensure that the supporting documents really match up to the information that you've given. Something else that I'm also going to say is that in addition to your host that I mentioned earlier and having the right itinerary and all that, is that you must have a plan to go back home, or at least you must demonstrate that you have a plan to go back home. So this is very important because a lot of people, they travel and then, the stories that you give, or maybe when you're being asked questions, again, be to the point. Don't give your whole life history because it's not important at that point in time. So you need to give a very precise story. This is my itinerary. This is what I'm going to do. And when I'm done, I want to go back home. And why are you going back home? Number one, because you have a job that you're going to return home after the travel. So this is very important. Then something else that I would say is that in addition to, demonstrating that you're going to go back home is also very closely linked to ties. So demonstrating and giving that proof of ties that you have, this is very important because they want to know that are you going to come and then become a problem? So, for example, are you going to go there and start utilizing their free medical services and become a burden to the system? Or are you going to go there and disappear and then you become, again, a burden to the system? So you really have to, in addition to just showing the ties, you also have to show that you're going to return home and that you're busy, you have something to do. Yeah. So this is why a lot of people say that single people get denied visas, because you don't have a family to go to. If you're a single woman, sometimes it's taken that you just want to go get married and then get someone to give you the documents. So you really have to demonstrate that you have some ties and something that you're going to go back to. I have a business, I have a project I'm running. um, I have a job. I have a job, and the organization can write you a letter that vouches for you, that says this person has worked with us for 10 years. They've traveled to different countries. They've come back. They're not gonna disappear. So that is very, very important. You have to think about that. You have to take that into account, because if you don't demonstrate ties to where you're from, most likely the visa will not be issued. So that's really more general. As I said, again, feel free to leave your comments. Even if you watch the video later, feel free to leave your comments and ask me the questions, and I will try to answer them in future videos, depending on the demand and the need that's there. So really, feel free to leave the comments. I'm not going to go deep into different types of visas and all that. I just want to stay more general, the general principles, because I think these are the most important. The last thing that I'm going to give as a tip for application of visas is that you must, if you can, always make sure that you have, especially for the countries that are very difficult to enter, the USA, the UK, always make sure that you have some travel history. So there's so many opportunities to travel. Travel has become cheap over the last 10 years or so. It's cheaper to travel. So, and you don't have to travel to in the most expensive, in the most luxurious way. So you can always have a very simple travel to nearby countries, to many countries where you do not require visas, because this kind of history builds up. And when you'll be applying to one of those major countries that really have a lot of requirements, history of travel really works for you, because you can demonstrate that you've gone to different places and you've come back to your country. So build that travel history slowly by slowly. I would advise you to do that, because if you have that, then it will be very easy to demonstrate that you're able to go back to your country. You're able to travel for tourism purposes, because I mean, sometimes you're there, you're asking for a tourist visa, but there's nothing that shows that you're interested even in traveling, that you've gone somewhere. So be careful about that. Yeah. So remember to subscribe and leave your comments.